We've got a lot to cover today, a lot of news, as my first guest reminded me off the air, and that is conservative commentator and author of the Naret Files on Substack, Eduardo Naret. And Eduardo, look, the pushback is getting stronger now against the Democrat and mainstream media hysteria over the Signal chat group foul-up. And it was probably a foul-up, let's admit that. But Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is doing some of that clearer pushback on X. He had this post about how no classified info was leaked, no troops were in danger. I have to ask you, how long do you think before the Democrats move on to something else? Or do you think this is going to be something they just keep in their mouth for the next 4 years?
The entire outrage to this story is fake, Jake, and let me explain why, and let me explain to your audience what they really need to know. So what you had here was the president's cabinet, members of his senior staff in a group chat, and Jeffrey Goldberg accidentally gets added to this group chat, okay? He wasn't supposed to be here. The administration has admitted as much. He wasn't supposed to be in that chat. And then you hear, like you said, the Democrats in the media going on and on and on about this is a national security breach. This is a failure in national security. This is threatening the safety of our country. Okay, let's go through what some of those things are, because I seem to have a very different definition of what a national security threat is to our country than what these people do. So as an example, to me, it's a national security threat to our country when you allow tens of millions of fighting aged men whose identities you cannot vet, whose backgrounds you cannot check into your country. That's a national security threat, and Biden did that. A national security danger, a national security failure is when 13 American service members die because of a botched, incompetent military operation. We saw that in Afghanistan. A huge national security concern, perhaps chief among them, is when the president of the United States is incapacitated overseeing 2 major wars around the world and has got his finger on the nuclear codes. That's a national security concern, okay? And so none of these Democrats or the media were interested at all in our national security when those things were going on. And I can go on and on about this. I could go on and on and on about the fact that, for example, you have a Democrat member of Congress, Eric Swalwell, who slept with a Chinese spy. I mean, is that a compromise, potentially, of our national security? So the only reason why they're hitting hard on this is because they feel that this is the first time in 10 weeks since Trump took the oath of office that they feel they can score a political punch on him, because otherwise it's been 10 weeks of straight losses for them. They feel like this is their first chance they can hit back, which it's not going to work. And a couple other quick points I want to make about this story. I've been in group chats before with some of these individuals actually mentioned here in the chat. I've spoken to high-level individuals before. And so what's surprising to me is that nobody's asking why Jeffrey Goldberg, if he's so concerned with national security, why he never just removed himself from the chat or flagged someone as to why he had been added inadvertently. I mean, if it were me, and I'm sure if it were you, Jake, at some point you would say, hey, I'm not supposed to be here, and I would get out. That's what I would do. And so the last point I want to make as well is this idea that this was classified or that was classified. I looked at the text. It doesn't mean a lot to me. And the reality is the only people who can say if this was classified material is the national security apparatus. They are conducting an investigation to determine that. But whatever you hear in the media, and your audience needs to know this, for people who are on TV saying this was classified material, this was top secret information, nobody knows that. Nobody knows that. And you can't put it better than how, as you said at the top, no names, no locations, no coordinates. So it's amazing to me that this is some major threat, but that's what you have here. They just want to score political points against President Trump.
There's another wrinkle to this, Eduardo, because I think there's good evidence that this Trump team has learned a lot about what the last Trump team during his first term, what they did wrong. Now, here's an example of that. When FBI Director Kash Patel responded to a Democrat member of Congress pressuring him to open a formal investigation into this nothing burger incident. Listen to this.
Another day has passed. Do you believe that it's now time potentially for the FBI to open an investigation into this?
I'm not going to comment on that.
Because you're the director of the FBI, you don't believe it's appropriate to comment on that?
Because there's a process in place. There's an ongoing litigation, and the National Security Council is reviewing this matter. And I'm not going to discuss any open or closed investigation.
That ongoing investigation, literally, the lawsuit happened today or yesterday afternoon. And the idea that you don't have an opinion on this at this point is frustrating to me.
No, it's not. I'm not going to prejudge any matters, and the men and women of the FBI will call the balls and strike.
Reclaiming my time,
not
sir.
you.
Sir, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to have...
Gentleman's recognized. You have 4 seconds remaining.
No, I have more than
you
that.
Have 2 seconds
Mr.
remaining.
Patel would not add.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Now, Eduardo, this reminds me of the opposite of what the Trump administration did all those years ago, in 2017 to be exact, when then Attorney General Jeff Sessions recused himself from the phony Russiagate probe, and that let that nonsense go on forever. I think this is a better team this time. I don't think they're going to be worried about any pressure, and they're just going to, and I don't think Kash Patel is going to start some kind of probe that's going to be Russiagate Part 2.
No, he's not. And the point about all of this, too, is for this congresswoman to get so bent out of shape with the cameras rolling. That's what it's about. Right? So they can have a closed-door hearing with the director of the FBI if they really want to know, the security concerns about this and what is being done about it. But they don't want to do that. They want to do it with the cameras rolling. They want to share the clips on social media. They want to get the praise in the mainstream media. So that's what this is really about. And I want to take a chance to respond to some of the critics, too, people who would disagree with you or I on this issue. And they're saying that to point to all these things that happened under the last administration, to point to things that Democrats have defended over the years is whataboutism. It's not whataboutism. It's the truth. And I've made this point several times since being on your show since Trump took office. And what I have said is that the Democrats and the media are not engaging in good faith, and we cannot and should not engage with individuals who cannot accept the truth. So these people are not coming from a sincere place about caring for the country, about caring about national security issues. It is hypocrisy, and we should call it out. And we don't actually have to engage with individuals on this matter who aren't willing to see the difference and the truth here.
Yeah. Let's get to the real crisis in America, one that you and I've talked about a lot as well, the massive illegal alien population and the judicial efforts to keep those illegals here. I know you've noted, as I have, that there are some federal judges who are basically calling for an inordinate amount of so-called due process. Really, they don't have that kind of due process for these illegals. And that's not feasible, is it? There's just not enough time in the world to deal with what they're trying to give these illegal aliens.
It's insane. Right now, the current backlog for immigration cases before immigration judges is nearly 4 million. 4 million cases, and we're in a country that probably has more than 30 million illegal immigrants. Under Joe Biden, we saw how illegal immigrants were given what are called notices to appear. It's a notice that you have to come before a judge to present your immigration case, and these immigrants were given notices to appear that were 8 or 9 years into the future. I mean, we're seeing notices to appear in 2032, 2033, and so this is what is so insane about our country. We have become a country that has allowed ourselves to be invaded by people who do not follow our laws, who routinely break our laws. And then we, because we have been led by stupid leaders, we assume that those people are going to operate under our legal system and are going to show up to a court date 30 years later. It's absolutely insane. One of the things the Trump administration did the day after he took the oath of office a second time a couple of weeks ago is he directed the Department of Homeland Security under the Immigration and Nationality Act to expand the definition of migrants who would be eligible for expedited removal. What that meant was they changed the definition to any illegal immigrant who had been here for less than 2 years could be subject to removal and deportation without a court hearing, and that the burden of proof was on these illegal immigrants to either prove that they had been here longer or to prove that they were not here illegally, that they were here legally. And I think that's what it should be for all illegal immigrants. It's very simple to prove if you are here legally, actually. We all have documents showing that we are here legally. And so what we ought to be doing is training certain government employees, certain federal officials to be able to do this thing on a very quick basis. I mean, if I had that job, I could go through so many people quickly. You have 7 days to bring me documents proving that you are here legally. And if not, you have to leave. And so I don't understand why we have become a country now that is going to allow a legal system to slow down the removal. And that's exactly what's happening. That's been the design. And I understand the legality of due process, obviously. I understand these protections that the founders put into the system. But my response to these people who want to continue citing these things is, well, is this really what the founders would have intended? I mean, could you see the founders maybe in the early days of American history allowing thousands and thousands of subjects of the British crown, of the Spanish crown, of the French government into their country, and then when trying to remove them say, well, let's let them use this newly found system that we created. Let's let them use that system against us so they can't leave. It's totally insane, and we have to fix it as a country.
Yeah, it's common sense. Finally, Eduardo, what in the world, different subject, but I got to ask, what in the world is going on with some of these conservative social media influencers? We learned recently that many of them have been taking payments from Coke and Pepsi to push back on Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s efforts to ban soda purchases with food stamps. I think this is a bad look. I really do.
It's terrible. And one thing we've learned is no matter if you're on the right or the left, we should always check where we're getting our information. There are unfortunately bad actors out there who get paid to say what they say. And so whenever you hear someone pushing an opinion or a view, especially one that maybe seems a little off-putting, that doesn't seem to make sense, like in the case of shilling for big soda companies, it's important to try to do your research or try to ask yourself, are they being paid to do this? Do they have something to gain from pushing this? And again, I think in this case, shilling for big soda companies, for companies like Coke and Pepsi that are, almost literally poisoning the American people. They are creating drinks that we know to be bad for our health. These are over-sugared drinks. To be doing that is actually quite gross. SNAP, food stamps, about billions and billions of dollars a year, up to 7 or 8 billion by some estimates. Some estimates are even more, as high as 12 billion. And that's actually part of the problem. We haven't had an accurate study on what SNAP expenditures have been for at least 10 years. But certain estimates say that it's $7 to $8 billion a year in SNAP benefits spent on soda and carbonated drinks. And if you consider the fact that Pepsi and Coke own basically half and half of the market share, that's billions and billions of dollars for these companies. So not only are we basically giving them free revenue, we're subsidizing them on the front end, but then you consider the fact that unfortunately a lot of these Americans who consume drinks and foods like this on a regular basis, then they end up having health issues. They get overweight, they have diabetes. And then if you're on SNAP, you're likely not going to be able to afford your own health insurance. So these people are also on Medicaid. And then the taxpayers, again, paying for that on the back end through Medicaid. So we shouldn't be funding big companies to give unhealthy foods to the American people. And I actually think, my position is the compassionate one. If you want to live in a country that cares about all Americans, it shouldn't be a class issue to have access to healthy food. It shouldn't just be that we say to a certain portion of the American public, oh, well, you're poor or you don't have income. Let's just give them the garbage food. Let's give them food that's unhealthy. I disagree with that. I think that's wrong. And I'm hoping that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. can create a system, whether through food stamps or something else, that we can incentivize healthy foods and we can create and make healthy foods more accessible to a larger portion of the American public.